Good evening to one and all present here. I, Shashwati Kannan, Executive at IIT Madras, would take this opportunity to welcome you all to today's talk, the final session of Thinker to Tycoon, a journey from the lab to the market. We have amongst us a power-packed speaker, Mr. Ranjith Mukundan, founder Stellaps Technology. Started in the year 2011, an IIT Madras incubated Bangalore-based IoT startup, Stellaps Technology is the brainchild of Mr. Ranjith. It is an end-to-end dairy technology solutions company. It is first of its kind startup in India working towards digitization of the dairy supply chain. It primarily focuses on data acquisition and machine learning. Mr. Ranjith has a bachelor's degree in electronics and communication engineering from Bangalore Institute of Technology and MS in telecom and software engineering from Illinois Institute of Technology, Chicago. He is a notable and frequent speaker at international forums such as Supercom International, the SIP conference, and so on. A hearty welcome from IIT Madras. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Shashwati. Thank you, ESL team, for hosting me. At the outset, I must say that the title is quite flattering. We're still not a tycoon by any measure. We hope to continue to grow. We have achieved some modest success. Hope to also hear from some of you on this in this session to see what you guys have picked up during your individual journey. So thank you, Shashwati. So I hope the slides are it's visible to you. I will spend the next 30-40 minutes walking you through what we have sort of accomplished and how we went about it.
Yes.
So just to set the context, this is what we do as in terms of the technology and what we do. We've tried to digitize the entire supply chain. It's a highly fragmented supply chain in India. Very small holding farmers, 2 to 3 animal farmers. The supply chain works something like this. So you're very small holder farmers who there are about 76 to 80 million of them, 80 million dairy farming families. It's quite a big sector. If you consider milk as a crop, it's the single largest crop on the planet. Right, it's 1/3 of agriculture is milk. 7.6% of our GDP is milk output value and the animal value. And as I said, 80 million dairy farming families focused on, which is roughly 36% of our population touching dairy in some form or the other. Right, and these are very small compared to, let's say, the more developed markets where you have larger farms. These are very small, farms, and from the farms, the milk comes to the collection center, which is where the milk is aggregated. There are about 500,000 collection centers in India. The milk grading and pricing happens. You check the milk for its quality, and then you ascertain how much needs to be paid to the farmer. And then you move the milk from the collection center to a chilling center, because milk is probably the most perishable crop out there. If you look at the other perishables, by no standards will it compare with milk, because milk, as you would all know, curdles very fast. I mean, from the time it leaves the udder, in about 6 hours, the milk curdles, right? So you need to chill it to 4 degrees centigrade from room temperature very quickly. And then from there, it moves from the chilling center, it moves to a dairy processing plant, which is where it gets pasteurized, pouched, converted into ice creams and all of that. And then from then on, it follows a standard FMCG route through a combination of distributors, retailers, and consumers. At each of these points, what we have done, we have used a combination of sensors, sensor controllers, IoT routers, basically data hooks to get data out and then make sense out of this data, right? And we sort of cross-correlate data that we get from one part of the supply chain with the other. So it's not like treating every node or every hop of the supply chain individually. The idea is to cross-correlate and see, how do you do 3 things? Improve productivity, improve quality, and build in a notion of traceability, right? The productivity levels are very, very, I would say, very meager in India. It's at a very subsistence level. To give you order of magnitude comparison, in India, the productivity levels are about 1,200 liters per animal, per year, right? That's sort of the annualized dry plus wet average, so 1,200 liters. It's sort of 1/8 to 1/10 of what happens in the other developed economies. So it's a very small, fraction. So productivity levels are very small. So unit economics doesn't really work out. And then quality, the notion of hygiene and quality doesn't prevail very strongly. I mean, if you want to buy, let's say, an antibiotic-free yogurt, you don't get it, right? You want to buy, pesticide-free, adulterant-free, contaminant-free, super fresh milk as if it's coming from the farm. You don't get it that easily, right? So it's mainly because the supply chain is fragmented, the notion of hygiene is not that great, and hence the quality is not there. Traceability, and thanks to COVID, thanks to all the things happening around us, there's a huge pull from the consumers demanding better visibility index into the supply chain. They really want to know where the milk is coming from. They really want to know is it good? And the market is opening up for other formats of milk. It's just not liquid milk. It's also opening up for, let's say, people are increasing their cheese consumption. People are increasing their paneer consumption. In India, meat is still not big. It's mainly milk, which is a very critical source of protein, just like pulses. So people do eat things like paneer as a protein, supplement. So across the supply chain, we use various combination of sensors, sensor controllers, and IoT routers to pull the data out with the ultimate goal of improving productivity, quality, and traceability. Right? I'm trying to give a glimpse of what happens inside a farm. The similar things gets deployed in the collection center, chilling center, and the plant. In the farm, for example, we put out a Fitbit for every cow to ensure that we're able to optimize the um, animal uh, animal breeding, animal nutrition, animal health, focus on preventive health care rather than sickness management. In fact, some of the initial designs of the wearable, we had good support from the Tenet group at IIT Madras way back in 2011, 12, getting, optimizing some of the RF designs, for this. How do you ensure that the battery lasts for, 5 to 7 years? A whole bunch of things, and how to do it at a cost point that it sort of works in the smallholder farmer Indian context. And then there's a herd management application that runs on an Android phone where we tend to Uberize the local village level technicians. There are folks like the paravets, vets, artificial insemination technicians, farm intervention technicians, nutrition intervention personnel. All of them intervene at a farm more as a reaction to something going wrong. So none of them focus on proactive data-led mechanism to intervene. So we sort of try to see, instead of recruiting a whole hundreds of people on our roles, how do you sort of Uberize existing people and incentivize them to use our platform so that the productivity, quality, and traceability can go up. And computer vision, we use things like thermal imaging to determine, is using a simple phone to see if the animals have any issue. We use facial recognition of animals, muscle identification to ensure that the animals are uniquely identifiable. At the villages, some of you might know, ID theft is quite prevalent, right? So there is a lot of collusion that happens between the guys who come to tag the animal for insurance purposes or lending or loan purposes, and then any animal dies, that animal gets tagged and the insurance is claimed. So it gets into a negative cycle wherein the insurance companies keep on increasing the insurance premium, and it becomes less and less affordable for the farmer. So how do you break this chain? And how do you ensure that the animal, all the data across the supply chain are put on a private blockchain so that depending on an insurance company or a private, or from a traceability point of view, you have non-mutable, data that's not manipulated, visible across the chain. And most importantly, all the data that we get, we're also seeing how this data can be used to underwrite risk better for the smallholder farmers. How do you ensure that the farmer can get credit at the right time or the loans at the right time so that he can increase his size from 3 animals to 5 animals to 6 animals and so on and so forth, right? So how do you use the data to make this happen? So it's helping you sort of trying to use the data that we're getting to help the banks underwrite risk better so that they can lend to these dairy farmers in a more data-led manner, basically data-led risk underwriting. They can insure the animals at a more reasonable premium. In fact, we're also seeing if they can insure the animals for health and yield, not just life insurance. In this part of the world, life insurance is very poorly penetrated. So let alone, health and yield. So the idea is to use the data that we're getting across this, the rest of the ecosystem underwrite risk better, be it in terms of financial services, insurance services, and so on. So this sort of in a quick nutshell what we do and how we go about digitizing the dairy supply chain. Now, shifting gears, a little bit of a journey. So we started this in 2011, 5 co-founders. So that helps because there is a hardware component. We have a small, VLSI design team that develops the hardware component. We have, cloud, we have AI, ML. So it's sort of a overarching platform that we have developed and continue to develop. So the idea is having a, slightly more, mature founding team helps in when things don't work out. It helps to have a founding team. So we've fortunate to have a slightly larger, founding team of 5 members. Each of us have worked together for about 24 years and have known each other, worked together. And this sort of helps, meet the ups and downs that you face, along the journey, along the entrepreneurship journey. To give you a glimpse of how it all started, so obviously we've been discussing, doing this, taking a startup lunch, for a while, and until we started, most of our experience at that point has been in working in the communication space, working for building a communication stack for, say, Microsoft or Apple, building out app stores for AT&T. So none of us had any experience doing work in India. Most of the time, the work was involved. The work that was done was either more US centric or Europe centric. And we thought technology that we have exposure to, can we use it to solve more compelling problems in Indian context? So that's how the discussion started amongst the 5 of us. And particularly, you could also say that we were all in our mid 35s or slightly earlier at that time, and that's about the time when the midlife crisis kicks in. So we're all thinking that what should we do to solve more compelling problems? We've been focusing on solving others' problems. Can we use it to solve some problems that's more near it in our backyard, right? And see if that can be converted into a real business, right? So so that's how we got started. Try to solve, in our opinion, at that time, a compelling problem, a scalable problem, and a problem in our backyard. And then we started planning, how do you go about it? We thought IoT, Internet of Things, can be a good team. At that point, it was known as M2M, wireless M2M. We said, yeah, we can anchor our approach around the theme of IoT, or M2M as it was called at that time. And we sort of said, when we started, we'll be cross-domain. We will not focus on agriculture, let alone dairy. We said we will focus on, healthcare. I still remember Professor Ashok organizing a joint session with all the doctors in Chennai and surgeons in Chennai and us to see if some of this can be applied into remote healthcare. And we were quite disappointed that the response was like, no, these things will not work in India. People like to see each other live. I think post-COVID things have changed significantly, teleconsulting and things that have really picked up. But this is like way back in 2011, when even some of the more advanced doctors said, hey, these things are not even working in the US. How will it work in India? Type. So we said, that's when we said, look, we probably cannot build out a platform that touches every vertical. Let's probably stay focused on agriculture. And within agriculture, let's probably pick one item, stay focused, do end-to-end, be vertically integrated, and do things end-to-end, and then apply that to and then see if it can solve the compelling problems such as improving productivity, providing traceability, improving quality, and all of that. And then we went about getting people onboarded based on the connects that we had. we were lucky to get some initial bootstrap customer. One of our friends' uncle was starting an organic milk dairy at that point, and said, "Guys, organic milk needs a lot of tech. Can you support me?" So a lot of fortuitous, run-ins at that point, and we reached out to some of our ex-colleagues who were willing to work for us without much salary, and then we reached out to suppliers, and then to the IIT Madras network, reached out to a bunch of advisors, and then the journey sort of started. And then we figured to sort of scale, we need money, and then we started reaching out to a bunch of investors. Back in 2011, the investor ecosystem was not as mature as it is today. So we had to reach out to a whole bunch of them, and then we decided to bootstrap it with some of our savings to begin with. And then thanks to the IIT Madras incubation cell, they helped us with money to get started as well. And then we also reached out to a whole bunch of friends and family. A lot of them, either the IIT Madras alum, 1996 batch, alum, or our colleagues from Wipro and things like that. So they were also quite generous in giving us some money. And then we also, with the bootstrap, once we had the bootstrap amount in, we reached out to some of the institutional VCs, and we were lucky to run into Omnivore at that time, who were the only AgTech investor, and they supported our vision. And then we started scaling up our product development, both the hardware side, right from the breadboard, through to the production grade PCBs, the cloud, and none of the cloud stack supported IoT at that time. So we went about developing some of the basic modules like event management and all of that grounds up. Started focusing on end-to-end solutions at that point, and then started, saying, okay, now that we have things in place, now we need to start expanding. And then we started expanding, deploying the solution, pan-India. We started down south, in and around Chennai, in and around Bangalore, and then we started expanding to other, parts as well. It's still a journey in progress. By no means, as I said in the beginning, we are anywhere close to a Tycoon status, but to give you a flavor, as I said, in 2011 is when we got incubated at IIT Madras after we took the plunge. We did a pre-series A with Omnivore. We were building out the digital access network, which is basically the data hook, across the supply chain. And in 2015, we did a round with Bini Bansal, who was at Flipkart at that time, Bloom, Venture Highway, started by WhatsApp and Google guys, BNext, Japanese investors. And then we started focusing on increasing our sales channels out. And then in 2018, which is pretty recent, we started doing things in a technology as a service model rather than selling things as a one-time capex. We started focusing on rolling out things in the form of technology as a service. And then as we speak, we continue to expand, we continue to need capital, we're focusing on unit economics, and the journey continues. And in terms of business, business metrics, right? We normally measure our sort of progress in terms of how many millions of liters of milk have we digitized, milk flow have we digitized, right? And then how many animals do we touch and how many farmers, do we touch? So as we speak, as on date, we have digitized about 10 million liters of milk flow on our platform. This sort of corresponds to a sort of a trade of about $1.5 billion that we have digitized on our platform. And it's a very small fraction. As I mentioned, the total milk flow in the country is about 560 million liters of milk per day, organized plus unorganized sector, right? We are sort of touching, out of which about 25% is in the organized sector. And out of that 25%, we are probably digitized about 6 to 7%. Still a long way to go. And there's a lot, we continue to build out a tech stack. There's a lot of tech components we'd like to build to automate things, to make things more data oriented. And that is something that we continue to do. And from a commercial standpoint, we have continued to grow our order books. We crossed our 100 crore order book levels last financial year. This financial year, we sort of plan to grow again by another 50%, touch about 150 crores. And despite COVID, because milk being an essential commodity, we got good support. We were lucky to get good support from the authorities to continue our operations. Despite even at the peak of lockdown, you could only see two types of things, going around in the inter-district traffic. You either had ambulances or you had milk tankers, right? So being an essential commodity helped us. We got some tailwind because people did recognize milk is an important, source of immunity as well. People started marketing healthy milk and all of that. So that way we were quite lucky, absolutely lucky, not planned at all, that we were able to latch onto some tailwind that we got as part of this whole COVID episode that is still playing out, nowhere close to, ramping down. And one of the byproducts of what we did, we didn't intend to sort of focus so heavily on impact, but the fact that agriculture and dairy, there are several smallholder farmers involved. It sort of, we also came as a byproduct, started like generating a lot of impact, attracting a lot of impact, of impact investors. We got a lot of undeserved attention for the kind of impact that it creates on the smallholder farmers. And then we started looking more deeper. Then we figured, yes, I mean, as technology, comes to the fore, as operations come to the fore, the key actor in all of this is a smallholder farmer. And how does it benefit a smallholder farmer, right? Majority of the farmers in this segment are smallholder farmers, right? About 76, 80 million dairy farming families, right? And a lot of them, a significant majority are smallholder farmers. So you hardly find people with 10, 20, 30 animals. Of course, there are places in Punjab and Haryana where you have large farms, but then those are very, very minuscule, right? So typically, dairy farmers, earn about 30, 40 rupees, per day, right? That's sort of their income levels, per day. They don't have access to lending, even if they know how to ramp up the herd size. No one wants to lend to them because they think it's a very risky segment. No access to farm services because all the best of veterinary doctors, best of animal husbandry technicians, they've all migrated to the cities, running pet clinics, right? And focusing on more urban centric use cases, which is more remunerative. So farms are left without much support, right? So they need to fend for themselves, and hence the yield is sort of very, very poor. The scale of the problem is quite big. As I said, 50 million of the smallholder farmers, and it's a significant portion of our GDP. So we also looked at all the work that we're doing purely from a business point of view. How can it be made sharper so that it becomes a win-win for all the stakeholders, especially the dairy farming families? And using our intervention, when we took measure, of course, this is sort of a best case that we have taken to demonstrate what is possible, what is aspirationally possible. So we know that some of the farms where we have intervened, where we've given good market linkages through some of our customers, the income levels can go up from the current levels of about 30, 40 rupees to about 5,000 rupees. It's the order of magnitude increase, right? The productivity can go from 8 liters to 250 liters. So it's not like one animal starts producing a whole lot of milk. We also start increasing the herd size. The herd size goes from 3 to 20, and the per capita goes up. Then cumulatively, you can have a 30x increase in your farm productivity levels. And all you need is half an acre land. You don't need to have huge amount of land to sort of do this. And consumers, we realized, are willing to pay more if you're able to show them that it's a highly traceable, highly milk that is rich in omega-3 fatty acid, milk that is free of adulterants, contaminants, and all of that, right? So it becomes a win-win. Consumer gets really good stuff. The farm productivity levels goes up, and the technology intervention, we can deploy more and more technology because the unit economics for all stakeholders starts looking better. From an environmental impact point of view as well, right? As the productivity goes up, the methane emissions can be on an aggregate level brought down, right? Typically, animals release by way of flatulence and other mechanisms about about 70 to 120 kg of methane gas a year, and the negative impact is much more heavier than the impact of the normal methane, 23 times more heavy than the normal C or carbon dioxide emission. So the release of about 100 kg of methane per year per cow is equivalent to about 2,300 kg of carbon dioxide, right? And according to FAO, which is an agriculture organization, 18% of the total release of greenhouse gas, and it is from cattle is a key contributor. So what we figured is that as the productivity levels goes up, right, we can reduce the carbon footprint by about 60%. This again, not an originally intended target, but it's something that we realize over time. These effects also start kicking in, right? As the productivity goes up from a mere 5 liter to 12 liters, and as the average per capita productivity goes up, farm level productivity goes up, you can pretty easily reduce the carbon footprint equivalent by about 60%. So this is an unintended byproduct. We never started with this intent. It's just that when you start intervening at a very basic level in any agricultural commodity, including milk, these impacts become quite relatively very powerful, which you might want to look into should you want to get into an agriculture type of a segment. Energy consumption, quite amazing. It was not originally intended as to how this happens. So we sort of figured that the cold chain to chill milk from room temperature to 4 degrees, we spend about 2 billion kilowatt hours of energy annually for milk, which corresponds to about 400 million dollars worth of energy if you were to chill the milk completely using grid. But unfortunately in India, grid energy is not still available in a lot of places, especially if you go up north. In these remote villages, you don't still get good energy. So people tend to chill milk. The dairy processors tend to chill milk using diesel. And if you actually take the diesel value, it's probably going to be $1.5 billion worth of diesel that's burnt every single year to chill milk, right? And 0.5 billion liters of diesel gets consumed. To just get you a feel for how it compares with the automotive industry. Automotive industry burns about 100 billion liters of diesel in a single year, right? And just for milk chilling, we consume 500 million liters of diesel. And through efficient management of cold chain through IoT and AI ML, we can easily bring it down by about 25%. Make sure that chilling is more efficient. You're not under chilling the milk, you're not over chilling the milk, there is no gas leakages and all of that. You can sort of bring it down. So I think this again was an unintended impact of when you try to solve a compelling problem. A lot of these impacts come to the fore, and when you actually get closer, you figure that there is a lot more what you're doing than what you'd originally set out to accomplish. And then all the data that we get from the various parts in the supply chain, we use the data to develop something called a SmartMoo score, which is an alternate credit score for the dairy farmers, based on the animal data, based on the data about the farmer psychometrics, in terms of, is the farmer doing vaccinations more often? Is the farmer adherent to the deworming protocols, right? So not all farmers are the same. Some are more progressive, right? So who are the top 5 percentile of farmers who are more adherent to the protocols? The idea is to do these kinds of collect this data that automatically that we get across the supply chain, helps us crunch a potential alternate credit score for the dairy farmers. And this score we use to underwrite risk differently, so that a typical bank might say, hey, this farmer has actually defaulted in a microfinance loan a couple of years ago, so I'll not lend him. But then our score can override that and say, hey, no, this farmer is not good. He's actually progressive. He's doing all of this. So it's not what you think. Right. Similarly, insurance. So we're trying to see, can the farmers be given quarterly reducing insurance premium? So it's like saying, if you are a better driver than I am, then you should be actually getting better car insurance, right? So the idea is a farmer who's more progressive in terms of taking care of his animals, can he get better insurance, right? Can he get can we underwrite insurance risk better? Can we actually do daily insurance premium, so that farmers cannot afford to pay a lot of insurance premium upfront? So can we do, with every day of milk pouring, can we give him 1 day of insurance, sort of a sachet insurance? And can we, on the platform, we're trying to onboard cattle nutrition folks. So we're trying to onboard cattle pharmaceutical folks. The idea is it's a pretty hard problem to solve. So you can't solve it alone. So the idea is to take a ecosystem, a platform approach, and see if as a combination of multiple stakeholders, can we solve the problem quicker, faster, and everyone sort of benefits. Some of the shifts This is probably my last slide, and I think I have another 5-10 minutes. This sort of a critical summary of how we started out when the whole journey began, and how some of the shifts that we have accomplished. So when we started, our fundamental focus was on the farm side, right? We were thinking we should automate the farm, we should get more technology into the farm, we should focus on any kind of crop, not just milk, and we should probably sell our technology both in a B2C and a B2B manner. And we were not looking at an ecosystem. We're saying, hey, let's solve all of the problem ourselves. There's so much a problem. Every problem you solve is about it. But then as we progress, we figured that unless you take a supply chain view, it becomes very difficult to make data and software, to take a data software centric approach. It becomes a pretty automation centric approach and not a digitization centric approach. So we shifted from a farm only approach to a supply chain approach. We figured that every crop is different, right? A potato is different from milk. Spinach is different from milk. Every crop is different, and milk is sort of a single SKU product. Right? Milk is milk is milk, whereas you have different variety of other crops. So we figured that we're complicating things. Let's stay focused on milk and get more vertically integrated. And then we also figured that it's very difficult to recover money from the farmer directly. So we said, hey, let's not do a B2B approach. Let's actually do a B2C side of an approach. B2B2C, so that the recovery becomes fairly easy. And then we also, so that's sort of the approach change that we took from a go-to-market perspective. And let's not take a Stellapps only approach. Let's take an ecosystem led approach, right? On the technology front, we were focusing on a lot of bought out hardware, and then we said we'll only focus on software because we fundamentally came from a software background. We didn't have a strong focus on data play at that point, and the focus was completely deep tech, right? How do I focus on hardcore technology blocks alone and live out the rest? But as we progressed, we figured that a hardware software bundle is what makes more sense. And we figured that we were taking on more than what we could swallow. So we outsourced a lot of the hardware development to third parties. And we started taking a more and more data-centric approach. And then instead of using a tech as the core, right, we said, okay, tech can only be an enabler. It's a business to the fore is what really matters. Right? And pricing model too reflected this change. We were having sort of a product-centric pricing. We moved to a service-centric pricing, focusing on productivity, quality, traceability, credit and insurance, and not like licensing a product. Moved from a one-time licensing to more recurring per liter licensing. Took on a more simplistic, earlier the pricing models were very simplistic, saying, hey, this is the product that you buy and here is what you need to pay. But in a service-centric model, it gets a little more complex, but that's what works well in Indian context. We figured that there has to be a revenue share component and a core revenue component. When we started, since it was hardcore tech only sale, it was very operationally light. As the services component, it became operationally heavy. It was sort of low risk when we started we didn't have any mitigation strategy in place. But when we took a service-centric approach, we are owning up more risk. We are owning up inventory risk. We're owning up trade risk. We're owning up multiple forms of risks that come in. So how do you better have a proper risk mitigation strategy as well. So we sort of progressed from a low risk, no mitigation approach to a high risk, better mitigation approach. Financial model, we were fundamentally focused on equity. We didn't leverage debt as much, but then we realized as we progressed and got more mature, we figured that we can actually leverage the debt instruments available in the country much better. We were initially circumspect about valuation and how much we dilute. Then we figured when there is capital available, take that capital and build out to scale. You're better off owning a smaller piece of a larger pie than trying to own a larger piece of a smaller pie. So we said, let's take the capital when it's available. Debt management wasn't our forte. Right now, as we speak, we do very strong debt management. very ring-fenced capital across term loans, across working capital loans, across venture debts, across structured loans. How do you sort of use the multiple loan products to our advantage? That's something that we do a little better compared to where we were earlier. Earlier we were, as I said, being all techies, we were completely focused on getting more deeper and deeper into R&D. Then we figured that we need to focus on rollout enablers and not just tech blocks. And that's sort of a shift we took. Initially, when we started, it was a very working capital friendly approach because you're just building out a product and selling it. But when you take a service centric approach, your fixed asset requirement goes up, your working capital requirement goes up. And that's when you start focusing on unit economics much better. When we started, we had very poor notion of how a unit economics will pan out. It was on an Excel sheet, it looked good, but in direct operations, how do you make the unit economics work? So we started looking at that more closely. And since we said when we started, we will take our tech stack globally too, but then we figured we just need to hit the ball out of the park in India first, and then look at international markets through other channels. Operations were pretty ad hoc and lightweight when we started because it was more tech sale, whereas when we got operationally intensive, we needed more process orientation, we needed more cost optimization. We needed to onboard people who had a lot of Six Sigma exposure, process exposure, so that they can make sure that the unit economics works and things work without in a very process centric manner, not on a people dependent manner. And we moved from being a very founder centric approach to getting more leadership on board. And then started focusing on, okay, there's no point in focusing only on customer acquisition, right? We just need to also make money at some point, and that's where we started focusing quite heavily on the monetization aspects. So as you can see, right through go-to-market, technology, pricing model, financial model, the market operations team, business model, we've sort of tweaked our approach over time to make sure that we are able to survive and stay afloat. That's sort of what I had to say. So my summary is that it's all about execution, less about ideas and innovation. And we figured that when we started, we were so focused on innovation ideas, but then later we realized it's all about execution. So this is about all I had. I'll pause here and take some questions as we go.
Yeah. Having listened to the growth story of Stellapps, I guess the floor is now open to questions from the audience. You can either unmute your mic or post your questions in the chat box.
So I guess people are in a same mood, so I guess they're still warming up.
Yeah, we have a question then.
Yeah, how can we choose people to build a team? So, so it's sort of we try to pick people based on our past experiences, referrals, based on we don't compromise on quality, but a lot of times you're tempted to fill a position because we're running out of time. There is no one way. The very standard approach of see if referrals work, see if you get access to through various channels, get access to good people. And in Bangalore, we're always competing for good talent because there's enough opportunities across down the street. So it's difficult when an Uber is recruiting. We recruit for the same resource. It could be an Android development, it could be cloud development, it could be leadership team, program office team. So there's no one mantra that goes on saying how we do, but what we learn from experiences, even if it's very tempting to get people on board quickly, because once you become an investor-driven company, you need to ramp up rapidly. Don't compromise on the quality. Keep it, even if it takes a little more time. Ensure that you're really convinced that the team coming in is of high quality. So that's something that we didn't do it that strictly, but we're trying to do that a little more strictly as we grow right now. The main challenges faced in the Indian market and what are the main advantages of the Indian market? Indian market is uh, quite challenging. Even the urban-centric market is quite challenging. So you can imagine a very rural agri dairy market can be even more challenging. When we took this product in a B2B2C manner or a B2B manner to our customers, none of them would want to pay for SaaS, for example, right? Software as a service is a new notion. They say, hey, you're developing the software once, why are you asking us to pay a monthly fee in every time, right? Unlike in Europe and US, people have the notion of paying for SaaS quite a bit. So that's the reason we took a hardware plus software bundled approach. So monetization is pretty important to getting unit economics, and your pricing model is pretty critical. Number two, sectors like agriculture and dairy is highly regulated by the government, right? Cooperatives like Mother Dairy or Amul or Avin, these are all quasi-government organizations. The chairman is nominated by the government. So there's a lot of bureaucracy that you run into. That's another problem. And even things like when you start deploying solutions to get a three-phase power in a remote village in the UP, it can take a couple of months, right? So we just try to see how do you navigate some of those problems. So it's like opportunity is very large, very little digitization, very little technology compared to, let's say, the US and Europe. So from an opportunity point of view, is really mind-boggling. $225 billion is the size of the dairy market alone, right? Agri is, you multiply that 3 times, that becomes the agri in a market. So the idea is how do you, so market is very big. There are problems, nothing new. You guys also would encounter this in your day-to-day life. Huge amount of bureaucracy, basic problems. Sometimes you have felt that we should have picked up a more urban-centric use case, which is a little more easier to solve. You don't fight for power and electricity problem. But when you start solving an urban, very rural agricultural problem, some of the basic one-on-one that you take for granted in the urban scenarios becomes a big issue. So, but yes, it's an opportunity as well as it's a problem that can be converted to a product which the market. So the next question, how to choose the right idea that can be converted to a product with the market demands. So this sort of a product market fit question, as I said, you just can't stick to an idea as you get started. So as you roll out, you will get a lot of feedback from the market. So you will have to make changes. You can't, as you said, where we started saying, let's only focus on the farm side. Then we figured that you can't recover money from the farmers, right? And not all the farmers value technology. So we said, okay, let's shift to a supply chain approach, right? And let's shift to a B2B2C approach. Let's shift to a demand backward approach. So we have to keep the ear on the ground. Once you start selling, you'll notice that your pricing strategy has to change. Your product strategy has to change. You might start as a deep tech. You might want to shift from selling only licensing tech to sort of doing tech as a service. Whole lot of changes, right? You'll be lucky if you hit the WhatsApp movement saying, okay, you built a WhatsApp and you were able to cash out. That can be a small fraction of the businesses pan out that way, but a huge amount of businesses, what we've seen, the notion of pivoting takes place. So I don't think pivoting is a one-time exercise. I think pivoting happens throughout the journey. Some pivot may be big, some pivot might be very small, some might be financial pricing strategy, GTM in manner, some of them might be a product market fit in manner. So just keep your ears on the ground, be very flexible to keep tweaking, right, till you sort of feel the velocity picking up, till you feel the headwinds go away and you get more tailwinds. What type of thoughts required to go digitized rather than conventional? I didn't quite understand the question, but digitization, I think communicating the digitization value prop in a very simple layman language is important, because people out there, especially the agri and rural chain, they don't care about, do you have access to a smartphone for all your services, or do you need to still make phone calls and take a bus and go to the taluk to solve a problem, right? You need to articulate in terms of how much money can they save, right? How much of demand can they get access to, and how can their general lives improve? So digitization is something that we understand sitting here, but when for customers out there, it finally boils down to whether you can articulate the digitization in terms of outcomes. Can you make more profits? Can you improve your income? And can you get more convenience? So I think that's what you need to do. What are your thoughts about digitization in the healthcare sector, especially in the backdrop of COVID? As I said, healthcare digitization, I think it's a really good time to be in, be it education, be it healthcare. As I said, when we started, we did look at healthcare. We did look at things like post-operative ortho care. If you broke your leg while playing football, right? You don't want to keep visiting the doctor once the basic visit is done after the minor surgery. If there's a ligament tear, so how do you sit at home? It's because surgeons make their money when they're in the operating theater. They don't make their money when they're consulting. Consulting is a necessary evil for them. It's like building a sales pipeline for the surgeon, right? But this was like in 2011. But at this point, I think given that be it a skin specialist, be it other than it's like a dentist, you probably need to go. But a majority of the cases, even if there's a one-time visit, your subsequent visits can be over a digital channel, right? So I think it's a good place to be in. COVID would get a huge impetus care and education, going digital. So that's about the questions that I saw, Shashwati. If there's any other questions, I can take it. I think good questions, and I hope I was able to address them.
Yes, sir. So just one last question from the feedbacks that we received from the previous sessions. What was your contribution? What was your contribution from your post-graduation studies towards building your startup?
Yeah, so to be honest, I think purely from when at least when we were graduating, right? I mean, we are relatively come from a slightly more older generation than most of you on this call, right? So the industry connect was very limited. During the undergrad days and the grad days, the industry connect wasn't that great. But today I noticed that the industry connect is really, really good, right? People actually solve their internship problems, solve for some of their, as part of the curriculum, solve problems that's more industry facing. So thanks to the stronger industry, touch point, and I've really noticed this IIT Madras do this exceptionally well, because you have access to the research park, you have access to people like Professor Ashok, who works industry backward. This is also pretty much the same in Indian Institute of Science, where departments like CEDT, they work industry backwards rather than saying, okay, I'll do something pedantic and I don't know what kind of problems it solves. So compared to when we passed out to where the kids are today, I think you guys are extremely lucky to have that industry connect. And that connect, I think, make sure that the skill sets that you're bringing up, the mindset that you're putting on together, right, becomes much more relevant for entrepreneurship. Compared to where we were, it was a lot more pedantic, a lot more bookish compared to vis-a-vis solving real life problems. But I think today things are much better. There are people, there are institutes, not just IIT Madras, but be it Kharagpur, Mumbai, they're all looking at solving real time problems. And the industry engagements, I think, will certainly help. And like the eCell that you have, there is equivalent organizations even in IIM Ahmedabad, there's an equivalent organization in Kharagpur. All of them are trying to ensure that there is huge industry connect, so that you're sort of trying to solve more real life problems. And that sort of becomes a trigger for taking on real life problems as an entrepreneurial opportunity. I think there's one last question. How to identify build a strong skill set as a postgrad student? So as I said, work industry backwards, right? Not book forwards, right? So book is good, your fundamentals are good, but look at what problems interest you out there. There's so many problems, right? There's a question on healthcare. There's a question on energy management. There are water management, digitized commerce, right? And don't try to copy what problem has been already solved, because if the problem has already been solved, then there are a lot of people at it already. But when you look at a domain, you might be looking at it from a industrial production point of view, manufacturing point of view, civil point of view, electronics point of view. Look at it from a problem point of view and work backwards and see what are the building blocks that you need to bring to fore to solve that problem, right? When we set out, all of us were fundamentally from software and electronics background. None of us had any exposure to mechanicals, mold design, and all that. So none of us had any exposure to building scientifically managed sheds. You need civil exposure. But when you look at a problem as a whole, then you know that the solution is not solving the problem spans across, it will span across biotech, it will span across mechanical, it will span across electronics, and software and data and all of that. So initially when we started, we had a mind block that let me pick a problem that only a software and data can solve. But then we realized that to solve the problem in a very wholesome manner, especially in an Indian context, especially in a very rural context, you need to touch upon some part of civil engineering. You need to touch upon mechanical engineering. You need to touch upon biotech. You need to touch upon electronics, right? All of them put together helps you solve the problem in a much more wholesome manner. So when you take, so my suggestion, of course, there is a counter view to this saying that you lose focus and you'll end up spreading yourself too thin. But the other view is if you take problem solving as a key component, then you shouldn't really worry about what are the other building blocks that come into fore. Elon Musk is a great example, right? He was fundamentally a software guy, but today if you look at the kind of problems he's trying to solve, he's trying to solve a boring hyper tunnel problem. He's trying to solve a space problem. So I think when you spend enough time in the context of a problem in the kind of industry, you'll realize that you shouldn't be bogged down by the kind of sector that you graduated from. It could be biotech, it could be electrical, it doesn't matter. You need to look at the problem and work backwards and pick up all the skills needed to solve the problem. So that would be my suggestion based on what we have experienced. How to access industry problems? See, the IIT Madras is really good industry, connect, right? The research park. I think if you get in touch with, Jaya, Dr. Tama, and the entire research park, they have tremendous, network. We still benefit, from that network after all these years. Professor Ashok, Professor Bhaskar Ramurthy. These are people with tremendous, connect. I'm sure ESL also has a huge connect. So I think if you touch base with the IITM IC incubation cell, touch base with Dr. Tama, touch base with Professor Bhaskar Ramurthy and Ashok. So they are day in and day out looking at what industry problems out there and how to solve it. And they'll definitely give you a super connect with the necessary people. We actually got really solid connects through all of those interactions, right? For example, Murugappan sir, who's a vice chairman of Murugappa Group, used to be a mentor for all the incubatees when we were there. So he would say, okay, talk to Mahindra and Mahindra, they can help you understand this problem better. So I think you should tap into the ecosystem that is right next door to you. And I think that will help you, get really solid industry connects.
So that was indeed an insightful session. We thank you for sharing your startup journey, which could act as a motivation for scholars to turn entrepreneurs like you. Thank you, Mr. Ranjith.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Shashwati, for hosting me. It was a good engaging and answering the questions. Should any of you have any further questions, do please touch base. You have my email, and happy to engage. And I'm sure that as part of the engagement, I'll also learn a lot, from you guys. And I hope to continue to grow with, speaking and interacting with some of you. Thank you so much for hosting me.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Have a good weekend. Take care. Thank you.
Hope you guys benefited from the sessions that we conducted under Thinker to Tycoon. We request you to fill in the feedback form using the QR code or by clicking on the link posted in the chat box.
On behalf of CDC-R, I would like to thank ESL team for this engaging sessions and all the sessions that they have helped us out with. We would like to thank them for all the networking that they were able to do for the sessions and able to get so many good startup founders, and we hope that these sessions helped all the research scholars out there. So yeah, thank you, ESL.